Good afternoon. Please be seated. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. Committee reports. The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I wish to present the 7th report of Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Standing Committee on Social and Economic Development.
Dispense. The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Honourable Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for the Kelowna River East, that the report of the committee be received.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Honourable Member for the Maples, seconded by the Honourable Member for Kildonan River East, that the report of the committee be received. Is it the will of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed and so ordered. Tabling of reports. Tabling of reports? No. Ministerial statements. Member statements. The Honourable Member for Seine River.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'm proud to rise today to honour the Louis Riel School Division Indigenous Education Team, a team that I was a part of before becoming an MLA, and whose work in educating both students and staff in the Louis Riel School Division is transformational. They are represented here today by 8 members seated in the gallery: Rosemary Bird, Lorraine Bitchock, Sean Oliver, Joelle Tétrault, Earl Skeed, Veronique Reynolds, Kelsey Lenahan, and Corey Kapeluk. This team goes into different schools day in and day out, teaching students and staff about the true history of Canada. They provide education about treaty relationships, land acknowledgements, and they empower Indigenous students across the division. They open themselves up to students and staff and share their personal stories to ensure that others learn in an authentic and meaningful way. They have done amazing work, like taking students to Culture Camp at Fisher River Cree Nation, and allow students to experience ceremonial activities like sweat lodges. They teach languages like Anishinaabe-Moan and Cree to students of various ages, but most of all, they challenge colonial thinking. Their work extends beyond the students, and through their professional development programs, they have helped to educate staff of all levels about the barriers that Indigenous students face and how they can help decolonize systems. They help ensure that every Indigenous student in LRSD will be successful, that they will feel safe and feel like they belong. I have learned from this team, and it is because of them that I am here today. They continue to inspire me and give me courage to do the work of decolonizing systems in Manitoba, which I now get to do from the Manitoba Legislature. To the students who are watching in the Golden Boy Room, I want you to know that you belong, you are appreciated, and that you can and will accomplish incredible things. I would like to invite all members to please join me in celebrating these wonderful educators.
The Honourable Member for Roblin.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. With International Trails Day just around the corner, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House today to recognize 2 fantastic volunteer-run organizations in the Roblin constituency, the Friends of the Heart Trail and the Headingley Grand Trunk Trail Association. From the eastern end of the Roblin constituency in Charleswood, right through to the western boundary at Beaudry Park in Headingley, we are incredibly fortunate to have one of Manitoba's best urban trail systems situated on an abandoned railway bed. The Heart Trail begins in the Assiniboine Forest and runs the length of Charleswood just north of Wilkes Avenue. It's a beautiful wooded trail frequented by deer, birds, foxes, and the occasional coyote. The Friends of the Heart Trail are instrumental in the trail's maintenance and upkeep. Whether installing new dog waste bag stations, planting trees, hosting trail cleanup days, or adding new recycling bins along the trail, these volunteers are dedicated to ensuring a safe and enjoyable experience for pedestrians, cyclists, and their furry companions. Further west, along the Headingley Grand Trunk Trail, users will pass through 3 major prairie ecosystems: tallgrass prairie, wetlands, and forest. It's impossible to overstate the incredible work that the volunteers of the Headingley Grand Trunk Trail Association have done to make this trail what it is today. The boardwalk is a peaceful oasis of calm, and the nature playground provides trail fun for the littlest hikers. The association is also dedicated to preservation of the many important plants and animals that make their home on the trail. Where these 2 trails would meet, they are intersected by the Perimeter Highway, and that's where both of these groups have joined together on a project to get a safe passage across the perimeter that would connect the 2 trails. These volunteers have worked so hard over the last couple of years to secure grant funding to conduct feasibility studies outlining the different options, and they've got all the right folks around the table to get this project underway. We are all very excited about this project and the many benefits it will bring to both our communities. I would like to ask all members to join me in recognizing Diana Jignowski, Liz Lowen, and Carl Gompf of the Headingley Grand Trunk Trail Association, and Philip Jenkinson, Tyler Crichton, and Murray Morian, who join us in the gallery today. On behalf of all the residents of Charleswood and Headingley who benefit from your hard work, thank you for all you do for our beautiful trails.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan River East.
Honourable Speaker, today I'm joined in the gallery by Beverly Naduku, a strong advocate for sickle cell disease and the founder of the Sickle Circle of Manitoba. Bev flew home back to Winnipeg to join us here today and to spread awareness across our great province of Manitoba for those who are affected. I've known Bev and her family for well over 20 years. Her cause is close to my heart also. This year, the annual Andrea's Angel Walk will take place on September 7th at Kildonan Park in Kildonan River East. The walk honors Bev's sister, the late Andrea Naduku. Andrea was only 7 years old, a fierce warrior who lost her battle with sickle cell. Ever since, Bev has devoted her life to increase awareness of sickle cell through the walk and the work of her organization. The Sickle Circle of Manitoba is a small, volunteer-based nonprofit that supports patients and families affected by the disease. Sickle cell is the most common form of an inherited blood disorder. Early detection can often allow for timely treatment to prevent irreversible damage, which is why Bev's work is so crucial. The only cure is a stem cell transplant, and if left untreated, there can be serious risks for the patient. We must amplify the reality of the disease and create more awareness in our communities as it affects so many worldwide. Please join me in thanking Bev, the Sickle Circle of Manitoba, for their inspiring work and dedication to people affected in Manitoba. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Swan River.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise here today to recognize the amazing community of Russell. On May 1st and 2nd, hometown hero and 2010 Olympic gold medalist in men's skeleton event in Vancouver, BC, John Montgomery, brought the Amazing Race Canada to Russell, Manitoba. This was the best kept secret in the community. And when it was announced publicly a day before the event, the community was bursting in excitement. Meanwhile, on Main Street, a huge crowd was gathering under the arch for a community barbecue, sponsored by Russell Inn and Brendel Bruce Funeral Home. The success of the event was truly a community effort. David Clausen, the municipality, and Damon Gillis all provided immense support. Thank you to Wes Anderson and Adrian Falloon for their tireless work with the production company, as well as the countless volunteers and local staff force. Since 2013, when John began to host the Amazing Race Canada, he advocated to bring an episode to his hometown of Russell. And in 2024, his determination became a reality. Honourable Speaker, I'm not going to share details of the tasks, as it would spoil the anticipation and fun. But stay tuned at the end of July or early August when this episode is aired for the world to see. As John Montgomery says, and I quote, "It's another beautifully, brilliantly casted season which captures the essence of our country, that we are diverse." Thank you.
The honourable member for Lajmodier.
Honourable Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise today and recognize the Bannock Babes Collective. They are a talented group of Indigenous drag artists who fuse artistry with politics while contributing to their communities. The collective was founded in the summer of 2019 and has since created a space to celebrate the strength of queer Indigenous experiences. They've been described as the fiercest drag collective in the country. They brought their artistry to unexpected spaces like the Forks, art galleries, small towns, music festivals, reserve communities, and drag story times. Through their intentional presence in spaces that may, on the surface, seem unwelcoming, they're pushing the bounds of people's imaginations on what drag can be, who can be a part of it, and what a loving, powerful force it is. Sunshine House and its mandate are central to the work of the Bannock Babes. From the mobile overdose prevention site to harm reduction initiatives in First Nations communities, countless projects are meaningfully intertwined with their incredible artistry. Folks in the chamber may have even had a Bannock taco delivered to them by a member of the Bannock Babes in support of these important fundraising initiatives. The Bannock Babes are a family of aunties, uncles, and cousins focused on building each other up through their collective strengths. Their presence ensures future generations of Indigiqueer artists know there's a space for them and that Indigenous drag is foundational to the art in our region. While some people may say they create magic, the real magic is the everyday work of survival, resistance, love, and respect that builds a safe, artistically liberating, and highly supportive drag community. While the Bannock Babes Collective include over 30 members, we have in the gallery with us today the founding members, Prairie Sky, Feather Talia, Vida Lamour, Local Honey, and Anita Stallion. We are also joined by their elders, Gail Pruden and Willis of Thunderpuss. I'd welcome all honorable members to rise and acknowledge the work of the Bannock Babes.
The honourable member for Riel.
Business.
The honourable member for Riel on House Business.
Pursuant to Section 44(3) of the Conflict of Interest Act, I'm tabling copies of 2 complaints I've made to the Ethics Commissioner. One complaint is in regards to the member for Interlake Gimli. One complaint is in regards to the former Finance Minister Cliff Cullen. I'm also tabling supporting documents, specifically a Freedom of Information response related to both complaints. These documents concern a complaint I've made to the Ethics Commissioner regarding the member for Interlake Gimli and Cliff Cullen. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
While that is being distributed, I'll take a moment to introduce guests in the gallery. I'd like to draw the attention of all honorable members to the public gallery, where we have with us today from the Sickle Circle, Manitoba, Beverly Doke, Ford Doke, Jordan Prest, Kevin Daucray, Prince Samuel Daucray, Dr. Jameson Stoffman, and Juliana O'Gomes, who are the guests of the honorable member for Kildonan River East. And on behalf of all honorable members, we welcome you here today. We also have with us, seated in the public gallery from Duck Bay School, 15 grade 8 and 9 students under the direction of Valerie Gulbosh, and they're guests of the honorable member for Swan River. We have seated in the public gallery from River East Collegiate, 25 grade 9 students under the direction of Anita Stepanuk, and they're the guests of the honorable member for Rosmere. Further, I'd like to draw attention of all honorable members to the public gallery where we have with us today Glenlyn Tan, the Vice President of the Filipino-Canadian National Congress and the past President of the Manitoba Association of Filipino Teachers. Companions of Glenlyn Tan are Dr. Lay Ansaron Belga, MD Obstetric Gynecologist, Dr. Anthony Balaga, MD Anesthesiologist, and a licensed nurse in the Philippines and the United States. Michaela Beatrice Belga, biology student in the Philippines. Mr. Menardo Mahelan, previous town councillor in San Juan, Bagatas, Philippines, a registered nurse and a chairman of the town's Health Committee Center. Mrs. Evelyn Mahelan, an entrepreneur, registered nurse and pharmacist. Mr. Jojo Mahalan, registered nurse in Manitoba. Our guests of the honorable member for Notre Dame, on behalf of all honorable members, we welcome you here today. Further, I would like to draw the attention of all honorable members to the public gallery where we have seated with us today Mokhtar Penacer, Majan Penacer, Ashana Penacer, who are guests of the honorable member for McPhillips. On behalf of all honorable members, we welcome you here today. I would also like to point out that today we have 2 of our legislative pages completing their final shift. Ava Pillipot is currently in grade 11 and will be graduating in 2025 from École Hermitage Immersion in St. Pierre-Jolie, Manitoba. She plans to attend university where she will pursue an education in sciences and medicine as she is passionate about helping others. Ava plans to continue volunteer work in her community, and with her Army cadet, she is grateful for the opportunity and experience she received as a page at the Legislature and thankful to those who have shown her support. She acquired a deeper appreciation and respect for the role of the provincial government has in shaping Manitoba. She plans to share her experience with students at her school and in her community to encourage others to apply for the incredible opportunity. She's honored to have been able to witness history in the chamber and participate in its rich traditions. Ava will pay forward the encouragement and kindness she has received throughout the year. Congratulations, Ava. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Abigail Berganini will be graduating from West Kildonan Collegiate this June. Her hard work and dedication towards her academics have paid off as she is now set to attend the University of Winnipeg in the fall, where she will be majoring in education and minoring in pre-law. She hopes to have a future in politics, maybe even in this legislature. As she prepares for this new chapter in her life, she is grateful for the experience she has gained as a page. She has had many amazing memories here and has learned so much about the legislative process. She is confident that in the future she will use these lessons learned here to be able to make meaningful contributions to society while having a positive impact on others' lives. She is also very appreciative of everyone at the Legislature who supported her throughout the year. She's particularly thankful to her fellow pages who she experienced this journey with and who always lend a helping hand. Everyone in this Legislature has shown her kindness and patience that has made her experience more memorable, so she extends her heartfelt thanks to all. Congratulations, Abigail. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and again, congratulations to Ava and Abigail. Thank you for spending your time here with all of us, and as much as we've taught you, I'm sure you've taught all of us quite a bit. Honourable Speaker, that Winnipeg and Manitoba are home to many architectural marvels. Holy Trinity Church at 256 Smith Street is one remarkable building that is worthy of preservation. Unfortunately, its parishioners say it is facing demolition. My question is for the Premier. What are you going to do to help preserve this national historical site?
The Honourable First Minister.
I want to say to our 2 pages, a future doctor, future lawyer, all the best in what's next. Please stay in Manitoba. We'll certainly be willing to work with the parishioners, but what the member opposite needs to answer is why did Heather Stephenson demand information from the highest levels of government on how to issue a license to Sciosilica during the caretaker convention? Our colleague from Riel just tabled some very concerning information. Included in it is a briefing note generated for the former Premier of Manitoba, Heather Stephenson, about Sciosilica that sought to answer the question I just posed. This was generated on October 6th of 2023, 3 days after the election, after our team had been elected, but before we had been sworn in. So the question he and every progressive conservative needs to answer today, why did Heather Stephenson request information during the caretaker convention about how to approve a license for Sciosilica?
Wow.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And once again, we see true evidence of the Premier dodging and deflecting question period. And soon enough, Honourable Speaker, the Premier and the rest of his government colleagues will be in opposition, so they'll be able to ask questions within 3 years. There's a role government has to play in preservation of landmarks. But this government has a troubling trend emerging. Faith-based post-secondaries have seen their allocation cut by over 90%. Many faith-based community organizations and summer camps were caught up in the $4 million Green Team cut. And now Holy Trinity Church is facing demolition. My question again for the Premier is simple. Will the government be there to help Holy Trinity Church stand for another century to come?
The Honourable First Minister.
If parishioners come forward, we will certainly engage in a conversation with them. However, the question of the caretaker convention goes to the heart of our democracy. It's about respecting the will of the people. On October 3rd of 2023, the people of this province elected a new government. However, 3 days after that election, according to the information that has just been shared by the member for Riel, the caretaker convention was violated because Heather Stephenson, the Premier at that time, on October 6th, requested a briefing note be generated about approving a license for Sciosilica. That is the same day that their government tried to pressure us into approving a license to Sciosilica. They tried to rush it through, even without letting us know. We objected and told them to hold off on any licensing decision, at least until we were sworn in. But what's very crucial for Manitobans to pay attention to into these documents is that they were contained within an email in which the clerk of the Executive Council says, and I
time has
quote,
expired. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. So obviously there's more to come. So more dodging, more deflecting from this Premier. He's always trying to do that in regards to any kind of accountability that this Premier has to show to Manitobans. There is a process, Honourable Speaker, and I know that that everyone on this side of the House is going to follow that process by the Ethics Commissioner. Again, Honourable Speaker, government has a role to play in the preservation of landmarks and supporting faith-based institutions. When people come to downtown Winnipeg to find architectural and historic treasures, Holy Trinity stands amongst them. They're not only a church, they serve lunch programs, Honourable Speaker, over 10,000 meals a year. This is more than a building, and it's worth saving. One last time, will the Premier and the NDP government be stepping up to work with the city and the federal government to help save Holy Trinity Church?
The Honourable First Minister.
If the parishioners come forward with a request, we will certainly entertain it. But Manitobans come here to see democracy. The Caretaker Convention is at the heart of a democracy. It says that no significant public policy decision should be made after an old government is shown the door and before a new government is sworn in. Yet these documents say that Heather Stephenson requested a breach of the Caretaker Convention on the Friday following the election. She asked for a briefing note to be generated on approving a new silica mine in the province. Her clerk, the senior civil servant in Manitoba of the day, said in an email related to this note, and I quote, "I will continue to state as provided to these ministers that we are in Caretaker Convention until the new government is sworn in." End quote. The clerk was aware what was going on the other side of the aisle, that the clerk had to remind them of the Caretaker Convention. And perhaps most poignantly today, who are the other ministers to whom she refers?
Yeah, that's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And once again, we see deflecting and dodging by this Premier, and there's nothing new with you-know-who, the MLA for Fort Rouge, Honourable Speaker. We know that despite the promises of this Premier that he would be tough on crime, another violent incident in our community highlights his government's utter failure. A food fair co-owner as well as a family member were recently victims of arson when their vehicles were doused with a flammable liquid and set ablaze. This was at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, Honourable Speaker. Simple question for the Premier. Will he stand in his place and unequivocally condemn this wave of targeted shoplifting that has evolved to arson?
The Honourable First Minister.
What took place at Food Fair is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I condemn it in no uncertain terms.
That's right.
Our team has worked out. As we reached out to the organization, we will have more information to share later this week on actions we are taking in response. This is new information about the fundamental principle of our democracy being violated by the outgoing PC administration. The allegation that has been made is that they ignored the will of the people and sought to, through back channels, approve a major mining development in the province after they had lost power. The clerk of the Executive Council, the senior civil servant in Manitoba on October 6th raised the alarm. I will continue to state as provided to these ministers, we are in the Caretaker Convention. Who was she providing that reminder to? Well, elsewhere in the email it says, and I quote, "I understand that there has been a request from Finance, from Edit, and Ag ministers for this information," end quote. So we previously knew that the member for Red River North was caught up in this disrespect for our democratic principles. But today we learned also the minister for...
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And once again, deflection doesn't want to answer the questions on his own failing government's record on not only crime, but also on many other things that his government is failing to do for Manitobans. Businesses have been speaking out on the rising retail and violent crime taking place under this Premier's watch.
Starbucks.
The owner of one small business on Portage Avenue noted that the criminal harassment has become, I quote, more and more brazen. Masked assailants armed with bats, a baton, brass knuckles, stormed a business, assaulting staff. This was not New York or Toronto, but just a few kilometers from this very building. In lieu of support from this NDP government, the business owner has suggested they may have to place bats throughout the store for the protection of their staff. My question for the Premier is easy. What is his government doing about it?
The Honourable First Minister.
We're bringing together civil society, community, law enforcement. We've already held our first public safety summit. We're taking action to combat retail theft. Importantly, we also respect the will of the people. That's why we're taking action on public safety. Can the members opposite say the same? On October 6th, they inappropriately pressured our government to try and approve their rushing through an approval of the Silica project. We now see that not only did the Premier of the day, Heather Stephenson, request a briefing note on the same day, but her clerk, the senior civil servant in Manitoba, raised the alarm of the Caretaker Convention. What's significant is not only the heckling of one of the members caught up in this scandal, but also the new information about the member for Interlake Gimli also being involved. Furthermore, the finance minister of the day, Cliff Cullen, is also now shown to be involved. My question for the members opposite is how many PC ministers have to be caught up in this thing before it is called a conspiracy?
Yeah, that's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And it's unfortunate that the Premier stands in his place and during question period, which is supposed to be question period, but it seems to be question in question period, Honourable Speaker. It's unfortunate that again the Premier showing he's more showman than statesman. Whilst our business owners, staff and customers are tired of, and I quote, in quote, theft and vandalism that is only getting worse and worse, the Premier's hollow promises are putting more Manitobans at risk, not only physically, but economically, but he doesn't want to answer to that, Honourable Speaker. One grocer shared, I quote, "If I have to stand in my store and watch people steal, I won't have a store to stand in. I can't afford that. I have to take a stand." Will this Premier take a stand and advise what he will be doing to protect Manitobans? Because his actions to date have been an utter failure, Honourable Speaker. Will he stand in his place, answer these questions about Manitobans' safety, and what are they doing in regards to the rising crime in not only the city of Winnipeg,
Time has expired. The Honourable First Minister.
We've already invested millions of dollars in law enforcement and bail monitoring measures, and later this week, we will have more information to share about responses to this specific issue. However, one thing that I will never stop doing is standing up for our democracy. That's right. The members opposite engaged in a conspiracy to subvert the will of the people. I've already showed that the Premier of the day, Heather Stephenson, asked for a briefing note on the same day that members of their administration tried to ram through an approval of a major mining development. Right. We know that Kevin Klein, Heather Stephenson, Rochelle Squires, today we learned the member for Interlake Gimli, the member for Red River North, and Cliff Cullen were all involved in this thing. I will point out that in the email concerning the Clerk of the Executive Council, that's not only dated October 6th with the briefing note, the email is from October 12th, the same date that Kevin Klein and Rochelle Squires have publicly stated they were inappropriately pressured by other members of the government. Why did they ram this through?
Time has expired.
Whose interest?
The member for Fort White.
Yesterday, I asked the Finance Minister a question about the Labour Amendment Act. He said, I can't speak to that specific question. When I asked him if Manitobans could come speak to the BITSA bill, he said no. When asked about the Environmental Amendment Act, the Labour Amendment Act, the Senior Advocate Act, the Election Financing Act, hydro rates, and gas taxes, he said no, 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 and no. Out of 15 questions I asked him, he didn't answer one question, bringing his total to 82 non-answers in this House. The Premier is violating democracy in this House. The Minister is violating democracy in this House. The hypocrisy is rich on that side.
Order, please. The government bench needs to calm themselves down. I'm having trouble hearing the questions, and I'm sure you are as well. Order, please. I don't need the Leader of the Official Opposition chirping in, so please refrain from doing that. The Honourable Leader for Fort White.
Sorry, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fort White.
Am I able to start the question over again, as I don't know how much time? I don't know how much time I have left.
No. The Honourable Member for Fort White.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The hypocrisy is rich on that side of the benches. The Premier is violating Manitobans' democracy. The Minister of Finance is violating Manitobans' democracy. Will they allow Manitobans to come to this House and speak on this budget bill?
Time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thanks, Honourable Speaker. We're proud of our BITSA bill and the work it does in improving affordability and fixing health care in this province. But there's a very important question that we need to discuss in this House today, which the Premier has raised, which is the fact that we've learned that even more PC cabinet ministers tried to break the caretaker convention, including, and this starts at the top, Heather Stephenson, Kevin Klein, Rochelle Squires, the member for Red River North, and as the Premier mentioned, we've now learned Cliff Cullen and the member for Interlake Gimli are all involved in attacking our democracy. They didn't like the outcome of October 3rd, and they continue to still try to make major decisions that would affect Manitobans. We reject that decision. We want them to be held to account. We ask, will they stand today and be held accountable for their decision to attack democracy in Manitoba?
Great job.
The Honourable Member for Fort White on a supplementary question.
I'm going to start by reading a quote. Now, do they answer these questions? Do they face Manitobans? Do they explain to the people? Do they try and make their case as to why they believe that people's bills should go up? No, they don't. That's why they buried this in the back of a piece of legislation in the omnibus bill. That's very terrible, undemocratic piece of legislation. That's very undemocratic. Who said that, Honourable Speaker? This Premier said that. When you want to talk about violating democracy, that is exactly what this Premier is doing with this budget bill. Will the Premier allow Manitobans to come to this House and have their democratic right to speak to important bills and legislation?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Honourable Speaker, that BITSA bill delivers on our budget, and it delivers on the important things Manitobans sent us to this legislature to deliver on, which is fixing healthcare and making life more affordable. But again, I know the members opposite don't want to talk about this because this has major implications for a lot of careers across the way. But let's give this just another shot here at hopefully seeing some accountability. There were many folks across the way today that we've named that have been identified as trying to push to move forward with the Silica Sand project after they lost government. Will they be held accountable? We can see emails that show that the PC ministers didn't care. The clerk in an email said, I will continue to state, as provided to these ministers, that we are in caretaker convention until the new government was sworn in. They knew the rules and they broke them.
The Honourable Member for Fort White on a final supplementary question.
I have quoted this Premier at least 6 times in regards to the 2020 BITSA bill. This Premier says he has made mistakes in the past and he's changed. While proof is in the pudding, nothing has changed. This Premier is violating Manitobans' democracy right in front of our very eyes. This Premier is quoted as saying it's undemocratic, terrible, and wrong in 2020, and yet he is doing that exact thing right now to Manitobans. At the start of question period, he has the audacity and the hypocrisy to stand up and talk about democracy, and he's violating Manitobans. Will this Premier allow Manitobans to come to this House and have their democratic right to speak to the important legislation they put forward?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There are members in this House who are responsible for violating democracy, and they all sit on that side of the chamber.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
We know what happened is a clear violation of the Conflict of Interest Act. I'll read it out for the members who are chirping on the other side. Quote, a member must not use or communicate information to further the member's private interests or to seek to further another person's private interest. It is clear, Honourable Speaker, that what they did was to try to further the interests of another party. They are responsible for attacking democracy. Will they answer for their actions?
There we go.
The Honourable Member for Roblin.
Healthcare workers continue to go to the media to try to get this NDP government to improve safety at the Crisis Response Centre at HSC. A healthcare worker told the media that, quote, the entire staff team at the CRC remains very devastated and shaken. They are probably going to be traumatized forever, end quote. Yet security at the facility is often far away, sharing resources with HSC as a whole. This means that frequently they are unable to intervene in a crisis. The crisis center is often left without any security available on site at all. This is the second time I've asked this question. Will the Minister of Health commit to immediately posting full-time institutional safety officers at the Crisis Response Center?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Long-Term Care.
We take the safety and security of frontline healthcare providers with the utmost seriousness, and we are expanding ISOs across the province, something the previous government never did. If it were up to the previous PC government, CRC would have no security on site, and that is shameful. We're going to continue to do better. But I have a question for my critic. I've been watching her reaction through question period. I'm wondering if she plans to ask her colleagues about their violation of the Caretaker Convention. I'm wondering if she has questions for the member to her right. Does she have questions for the member to her left? Member to her right again, just at the end here, the member for Interlake Gimli. Does she believe it was appropriate for them to violate Caretaker Convention?
The Honourable Member for Roblin on a supplementary question.
In the most recent critical incident, a safety officer was assigned but was unable to safely intervene. Since the health minister has only provided these officers with pepper gel, in indoor situations they have no means of intervention that does not endanger themselves. An HSC security officer told the media, quote, "Giving us a pepper spray gel is not going to solve anything inside the hospital." Across the HSC campus, U of M Bannatyne campus safety officers carry batons.
We'll get you a map.
Safer indoor interventions like tasers are available as well. Will the Minister of Health immediately better equip ISOs in the Health Sciences Centre so they can do their jobs protecting staff and patients?
I don't think they will.
Sorry, the Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I've already previously given direction that all ISOs are to be trained on the use of all tools and equipment that will help keep staff and patients safe and secure across our province. I want to be clear, however, our government is doing the work that Manitobans elected us to do. Manitobans sent a message to members opposite that they were no longer in charge. So why is it, and I'm asking my critic again, why is it that she supports members in her own caucus violating a democratic principle that upholds governance in this province? Does she support the member to her right, the member to her further right, and the member to her left in their violation of what Manitobans elected governments to do?
Great job. Pretty compelling.
The Honourable Member for Roblin on a final supplementary question.
In a media article posted just yesterday, security staff at HSC say they don't have the tools that they need, and safety remains a key concern for nurses working at HSC. They do not feel safe at work right now. A key reason HSC nurses have not ratified their tentative agreement is because they feel unsafe at work. Darlene Jackson, MNU president, told the media that what nurses lack is immediate support in a crisis. The NDP could provide this immediate support. They could post more safety officers at HSC and the Crisis Response Center. They could provide those officers with the equipment they need to respond to danger both indoors and out. Why is this minister choosing not to respond to these desperate pleas for safety interventions?
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Every single day, we are choosing to clean up the mess of the previous government, and that includes making sure that institutional safety officers are on site at HSC, more coming there and across the province. Something that never would have happened if Manitobans had not voted out members opposite who took no action for 7.5 years, despite having the resources to do so. That decision-making is also reflected in their inability to respect democracy after October the 3rd. Members opposite violated Caretaker Convention. They said to Manitobans that your voice doesn't matter. They're heckling me right now because they don't want to be accountable to Manitobans, a pattern that hasn't changed in 8 years for members opposite. That critic could be different. It's clear that she won't.
Wow. The Honourable Member for Morden Winkler.
Honourable Speaker,
No, they're not.
starting a family should be a very exciting time for individuals, but for many Manitobans, there is increased stress in trying to line up childcare for when they return to work. With the long wait lists all daycares are experiencing across the province, families are desperate to find spots and often need to join wait lists for 12 to 24 months in advance. What is the minister doing to address the long wait times that parents are experiencing so they can go back to work?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. I will say that I've answered this question many times in the House. We have outlined in BITSA 5% increase in daily operating expenses, 2 extra professional development days for people working in the sector, an increase in wages. That member knows that, they understand that. I want that member to understand this, though, because she's new to the chamber, the responsibility that a person takes for their words and actions. It's very important here. Are they taking responsibility for what happened during that transition period? No, they are not. And what that member needs to ask is look at the front row, look at the second row, and ask her members whether or not they will take responsibility for those reprehensible actions.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Morden Winkler on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I've heard from my constituents firsthand that healthcare workers are turning down extra shifts at hospitals simply because they cannot find access to childcare, leaving medical wards and ERs short-staffed. We have designated childcare at universities. Why can't we do the same thing for healthcare facilities? Will this minister commit today to adding childcare spaces to hospitals and support our healthcare workers?
Yeah, great question.
The Honourable Minister of Health, Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate that question from the member opposite. The Minister of Education and myself and our departments are working together to make sure that we take an approach that puts Manitoba families first and healthcare workers across the province first, make sure that their families have the supports they need. That's why Manitobans elected us on October the 3rd, and that's why we continue to ask, and I'll ask that member now, does she believe that it's appropriate that Heather Stephenson, Kevin Klein, Rochelle Squires, the member for Red River North, the member for Interlake Gimli, which we've now learned all violated that sacred democratic responsibility and did not respect caretaker convention? Does she support that? Yes or no?
The Honourable Member for Morden Winkler on a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. This minister and his colleagues were quick to make promises, but Manitobans are still in the dark about the minister's pledge to expand $10 a day daycare. The Manitoba Child Care Association says they've still heard nothing. The minister has had months to announce specifics before his premier called the by-election. School lets out in 1 month. When can the Manitoba parents expect to hear details about this program?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Again, Honourable Speaker, I do want to thank the member for that question. It's an important one because, as I said before, we've outlined this throughout the debate process during this session. In BITSA, it outlines an increase in operating costs for the particular daycare centres. In BITSA, it outlines an increase in wages. In BITSA, it outlines an increase in professional development time. As you can see, this member will be able to support our BITSA bill by voting for it and supporting the early child care sector in this province.
The Honourable Member for Spruce Woods.
Honourable Speaker, today should have been day 2 of the grade 12 English exam. Students should be writing their tests, but instead they're left wondering what new exam they'll be writing and when they'll be writing it. They're also wondering how these exams will be weighed and if they'll have their marks returned to them by the end of the school year. So it's a simple question. I'm not sure why the NDP are so upset about it. Can the minister assure grade 12 students that their graduation will not be unnecessarily delayed because of his decision to abruptly postpone their exam?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for that question. As he knows, the exams are occurring. We've already answered this question. He can look in answers from yesterday. I do want to reiterate what's really important in this House, that we take responsibility for our actions. I haven't heard or seen any of that from Heather Stephenson, Kevin Klein, Rochelle Squires, the member for Red River North, the member for Interlake Gimli. Nothing. Haven't taken responsibility for those reprehensible actions around breaking of the caretaker convention. Will anybody on that side of the House stand up and finally take responsibility?
That's right.
The honourable member for Spruce Woods on a supplementary question.
Well, Honourable Speaker, I'm glad the minister mentioned Hansard yesterday, because school divisions have shared that they have been asked to revert to the previous pandemic-related testing system and develop their own exams on a school-by-school basis. That is the exact opposite of what that minister said yesterday in this House when he said the exam was simply paused, the personal privacy issue would be addressed, and the exam would take place before the end of the school year. So which is it, and why can't this minister keep his story straight when it comes to our public schools?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Again, Honourable Speaker, as I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it for the member, the exams will occur. He knows that this is going to happen. We mentioned this yesterday. We were very, very clear. We're also very, very clear about the important lesson we teach in schools, and that is to take responsibility. I know that member is new. Has he asked anybody in the second row if they take responsibility? Has he asked anybody in the front row if they take responsibility? I don't think he has, because you know what? If he did, he might not get the answer he wants.
That's right.
The honourable member for Spruce Woods on a final supplementary question.
Honourable Speaker, it's inappropriate for the minister and his deputy minister to imply that this was the default of the department. Exams aren't written overnight, and in fact, the deputy minister himself admitted in a CBC article, which I will table, that the exam in question was actually developed in 2019. No issue was raised with it, and this member has now had 223 days as Minister of Education to address any concerns he had in the lead up to June final exams. If the exam has been written and developed for 5 years, why did it take until May 24th for this minister to pull it?
The Honourable First Minister.
The mistaken question on the English Language Arts exam was created in 2019 when they were in office.
That's right.
They were in office for more than 4 years and never noticed the problem with the issue. Our minister and our deputy took immediate action to do what? Once again, clean up a mess that they made. But while we're talking about deputies, let's talk about the deputy minister to Kevin Klein during the transition period. Let's talk to the deputy minister to the premier, the clerk of the executive council. At the behest of the member for Interlake Gimli, the member for Red River North, from others in the former PC cabinet, they asked the clerk to provide information on how to rush this through before our government was sworn in. Wow. The clerk of the executive council, who he worked with when he was Heather Stephenson's staff, warned them about the caretaker convention. Was he aware of the violation? Was he involved?
Wow, good question. Good question.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Order.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Last week, I asked the Minister of Education about whether $10 a day childcare would be available to school-aged children this summer. The Minister of Education cited election blackout rules for not commenting, but it turns out that these rules do not apply to any communication related to a budgetary policy. I table this information for the Minister's knowledge. Manitoba families need to prepare financially as to how much they will be paying for school-aged children this summer. Since the election blackout rules do not apply in this case, can the minister explain if childcare will be $10 a day this summer?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Again, I do want to thank the member for that question. It's a very good question because affordability is at the top of mind of all Manitobans. At the top of mind to the point where throughout our BITSA bill, we have affordability measures, Honourable Speaker, that will address the very pressing monetary concerns of Manitoba families. It includes a very hefty increase in the operating grants of daycares. It also includes an increase in wages, and as well includes an increase in professional development time. It's an important question. Our BITS bill contains some of these measures. I hope that member will support it.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Very basic math here. 14,000 childcare spaces times 45 days of summer at $10.80 a day per child would cost the province nearly $7 million. The government, however, only budgeted $2.5 million for extending childcare to non-school days. If the minister won't confirm that $10 a day childcare will be extended to this summer, will he admit that he severely underfunded the amount needed?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Again, I do want to thank the member for that question, Honourable Speaker. Talking about underfunding the childcare budget, all that member has to do is look at the other side of the house here. Consistently underfunded, underperformed in the childcare sector, where we're creating up to 8,500 spaces right now before they were creating 700. And what would happen? It would have taken them 30 years, Honourable Speaker, to get to the point of 23,000. We're going to get that done in the first term.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park on a final supplementary question.
Honourable Speaker, this government committed $2.5 million, and that's not even half of what is needed to cover affordable childcare for Manitoba families this summer. The Premier promised during the election $10 million annually to extend $10 a day childcare for spring break, summer break, and holidays, and I table this. That's why it's surprising that months later, this still hasn't taken effect. Why did the minister fund only a quarter of what the Premier himself had promised for extending $10 a day childcare?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Again, Honourable Speaker, I do want to thank the member for that question because it's an important one. Last Friday, I met with the sector and they're very pleased with the investments that this government is putting into early learning and childcare. They finally have a real partner. As far as affordability goes, there is a subsidy program, Honourable Speaker, that is available to families that they can apply to, have their fees reduced to $2 a day, starting as of right now to get that done. That member knows that. I hope that she's providing that information to anyone that's asking that question. Thank you.
The honourable member for Riel.
Honourable Speaker, the attempt by Heather Stephenson and members opposite to improperly approve a silica sand mine license after they lost an election was a dark moment in our province's history. It has been described by their own former cabinet colleague as inappropriate, extremely disappointing, unconscionable, and corruption. Now we've learned that 2 more former PC cabinet ministers were involved in attempting to breach the Caretaker Convention and the Conflict of Interest Act. Can the Finance Minister elaborate on the complaints filed with the Ethics Commissioner earlier today?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his important work in bringing these concerns forward to the Commissioner. I know all Manitobans are deeply concerned to learn that Heather Stephenson, Kevin Klein, Rochelle Squires, the member for Red River North, the member for Interlake Gimli, and Cliff Cullen were all involved in seeking to break the Caretaker Convention with the goal of ramming through a mining project after the election. It's clear that they were all involved in trying to give the license. We've seen an email from the former clerk of the executive that reads, quote, "I understand there's been a request from Finance, Edit, and Ag ministers for this information." Wow. We're seeing how deep these concerns go. On this side of the House, we believe in respecting the will of the people. Yep. Well, the PC seek to hide their wrongdoing. We're bringing truth to Manitobans. These are serious actions that they deserve.
The honourable member for Brandon West.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I see that the NDP are asking more questions than they're giving answers for. It's quite obvious that they're much better as opposition than they are a government. It's only the high-profile incidents that make the media, but we as legislators are hearing about the struggles to keep a business open while retail theft is rampant. Just last night, media responded to an organized theft of almost $40,000 of high-end instruments from Long and McQuaid.
Oh, but he's tough
Again,
on crime.
ample security
Rob's tough on
precautions
crime.
and cameras don't deter crime. What is the minister's real plan for reform, or will he continue to toot his own horn?
The Honourable First Minister.
This is a serious issue. Our government has taken action. We will have more to say in terms of a substantive response to this issue of retail theft, which is connected to organized crime and which must be stopped. We are tough on crime. We are tough on the causes of crime. The member opposite, however, should be very concerned about the information shared here today. The Caretaker Convention is to protect the will of the people. It's to ensure that when we cast our ballots, the ballots that veterans fought to defend, that people in civil society fought to fight for, that those things are respected. That was violated by the outgoing PC administration, who tried to approve a mine even though they'd already lost power. Again, whose interests were they acting on behalf of? Which private interests were they trying to further? And most importantly of all, why, beginning with the Premier on down, did they refuse to respect the democratic will of the people of Manitoba?
The time for oral questions has expired, and I have some more guests in the gallery to introduce. Joining us in the public gallery, we have Kevin Blasko, Nadine Blasko, and Michael Blasko, and they are guests of the Honourable Member for Lagimodiere. On behalf of all Honourable Members, we welcome you here today. Petitions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number one, the federal government has mandated a consumption-based carbon tax with the stated goal of financially pressuring Canadians to make decisions to reduce their carbon emissions. Number two, Manitoba Hydro estimates that even with a high-efficiency furnace, the carbon tax is costing the average family over $200 annually, even more for those with older furnaces. Number three, home heating in Manitoba is not a choice or a decision for Manitobans to make. It is a necessity of life with an average of almost 200 days below 0 degrees Celsius annually. Number four, the federal government has selectively removed the carbon tax off of home heating oil in the Atlantic provinces of Canada, but as indicated, they have no intention to provide the same relief to Manitobans heating their homes. Number five, Manitoba Hydro indicates that natural gas heating is one of the most affordable options available to Manitobans, and it can be cost prohibitive for households to replace their heating source. Number six, premiers across Canada, including the Atlantic provinces, that benefit from this decision have collectively sent a letter to the federal government calling on it to extend the carbon tax exemption to all forms of home heating, with the exception of Manitoba. Number seven, Manitoba is one of the only provincial jurisdictions to have not agreed with the stance that all Canadians' home heating bills should be exempt from the carbon tax. Number 8, provincial leadership in other jurisdictions have already committed to removing the federal carbon tax from home heating bills. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to remove the federal carbon tax on home heating bills for all Manitobans, to provide them much needed relief. This petition is signed by Chantal Bachman, Brett McGrath, Derek Pike, and many, many more fine Manitobans, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba. To the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba, the background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, Provincial Trunk Highway 2, PTH2, is a 315-kilometer, 196-mile highway that runs from the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border to Winnipeg's Perimeter Highway. Number 2, a significant portion of PTH2 runs through the constituency of Spruce Woods from the border of the rural municipality of Pipestone and the rural municipality of Sifton to the border of the rural municipality of Victoria and the rural municipality of Norfolk Treherne. Number 3, this route is historically significant as it follows the original path taken in 1874 by the Northwest Mounted Police in their march west from Fort Dufferin to Fort Whoop-Up. Number 4, PTH2 is a significant commuting route for Westman families and is also utilized by those in the trade, commerce, tourism, agriculture, and agri-food industries. Number 5, the condition of PTH2 from the east side of the town of Souris straight through to the hamlet of Delow is in an unacceptable state of disrepair. Number 6, the newly appointed Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure has confirmed the department has no plan to refurbish this stretch of road until the 2028-2029 construction season. Number 7, the Minister outlined that the current 2028-2029 construction plan does not include the stretch of PTH2 that runs through the town of Souris, but instead starts on the west side of town. Number 8, the communities in the area have been clear that any reconstruction of PTH2 must include the stretch that runs through the town of Souris. Number 9, the Minister and the Premier have a duty to respond to infrastructure needs identified by rural communities. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. Number 1, to urge the Premier and the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure to immediately prioritize the reconstruction of Provincial Trunk Highway 2 in the upcoming construction season. Number 2, to urge the provincial government to include the stretch of Provincial Trunk Highway 2 that runs through the town of Souris in its reconstruction plans. This petition has been signed by Gail Williamson, Lyle Adair, Kim Eisner, and many, many, many more fine Manitobans.
No more petitions, grievances. The Honourable Opposition House Leader?
On House business?
The Honourable Opposition House Leader on House business.
I am seeking leave for the second reading motion to Bill 37, the Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Amendment Act 2024 to be withdrawn, and for the subject matter to instead be referred to a standing committee of this House this evening at 6 p.m. to provide Manitobans the opportunity to have their say on this very important bill.
Is there leave for second reading motion of Bill 37, the Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Amendment Act 2024, to be withdrawn, and for the subject matter to instead be referred to a standing committee of this House this evening at 6 p.m. to provide Manitobans the opportunity to have their say on this very important bill? Is there leave? No. Leave has been denied. Orders of the day, government business. So, as previously agreed to, this House will now resolve into the Committee of Supply to consider estimates from the following departments: the Chamber, Executive Council, Room 255 Families, Room 254 Health, Seniors, and Long-Term Care. The Deputy Speaker will now take the chair.
Mr. Premier, you ready?
Okay, will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask the members to please introduce their staff in attendance. Honorable First Minister.
Joined today by Sarah Thiele, the Clerk of the Executive Council, and Mark Rosner, the Chief of Staff.
Honorable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I'm joined by Braden Jones, Chief of Staff. Thank you.
As previously stated, in accordance with Sub-Rule 78, bracket 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honorable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Just sort of taking a look at a little bit ago, the last time we sat in estimates, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to kick off the estimates process, considering that we were, delayed in getting to the estimates process. So I'm glad that the Premier had given permission to the House Leader to move us into estimates. So that's great, and I appreciate after a couple hours of questions the last time we were in estimates that the Premier was able to get me the org chart that he presented near the end of estimates. So again, I think we sort of left off with the unfortunate situation that is troubling Manitobans that happened in Carmen, and we know that the Premier once again had offered his prayers with the family and the community, and I basically had asked him to just make a comment on the fact that for years when he was in opposition, and some of his now cabinet ministers, we would make a comment on the record, myself included, including some of our other cabinet ministers and MLAs, that we would offer thoughts and prayers with a specific family or whatever topic we would be talking about. And it's, as I pointed out in the last estimates process just a few days ago, that now the Premier has offered prayers, which again is great. But boy, Honorable Speaker, I tell you, back when the NDP were in opposition, whenever we as cabinet ministers would offer thoughts and prayers to a family or to a situation or to a community, there was an awful lot of ridicule being thrown across the chamber. And I mean, I'm just again thankful that the Premier is now seeing the light in some of the verbiage that he uses, but I just am seeking some clarity as far as why he would not have stopped that ridiculing that was happening when he was in opposition.
The Honourable First Minister.
You know, I think what I've always tried to do in the public sphere is to be serious and reverent of people who take their faith seriously, because I am one of those people. I start each day with a prayer. It's an important part of my life. I also think to my colleagues' comments, and I think what discouraged them about the former PC government was thoughts and prayers without action. There's a important distinction. Of course, thoughts and prayers are always welcome, but when you're in government, it's incumbent to act. We saw in the former PC government a remarkable lack of action on many important priorities here in the province. But if the question is getting to whether there's compassion across the partisan aisle, of course there is. You know, when I used to sit in the estimates committee with Brian Pallister, we'd have some testy exchanges and go back and forth with the vim and vigor that we've come to expect in this place. But at the same time, I can recall when he talked about family members being stricken by cancer, slowing the pace, taking time to show respect and show deference to his family's experience, such as any Manitoban would do. And so that's the course that I'm committed to. There's a very, very serious document that was tabled in the House today. It's a Freedom of Information request that was provided to our team on May 27th, 2024. Well, the Freedom of Information request is dated that day. I'm not sure, I guess, when we actually received it, which means that this is new information. Specifically, I think you need to understand that there is a context here in which I pointed out at the end of 2023, as reported in the CBC on December 27th of that year, that the former government tried to ram through an approval for the Scio-Silica project on October 6th. The document that was tabled today shows that on the same day, October 6th, that a briefing note was generated for the outgoing Premier of the day, Heather Stephenson. And it has to do with licensing approvals for the Scio-Silica project. Again, current members of the PC caucus went out to deny this, but Kevin Klein, interesting to see he and I on the same side of an issue here, refuted the PC caucus members' denials and instead, in fact, what we are saying as the NDP government is correct, accurate, and that he was inappropriately pressured to try and approve the Scio-Silica project. This pack of documents also lays out that not only was that briefing note generated on October 6th, but on October 12th, responding to a request from multiple former ministers of the Crown, including Finance, Economic Development, Investment and Trade, and Agriculture, that civil servants who are bound by duty to respect the Caretaker Convention were being pressured to share information regarding the Scio-Silica project, including this briefing note generated for the Premier. Such was the level of activity that the then clerk of the Executive Council, Catherine Girard, said, and I quote, "I will continue to state as provided to these ministers that we are in Caretaker Convention until the new government is sworn in," end quote. And again, for the record, those ministers were the Finance, Edit, and Ag ministers of the day, which is to say Cliff Cullen, the current member for Red River North, and the current member for Interlake Gimli. Clearly, the clerk felt what was taking place. The then clerk felt what was taking place on October 12th was inappropriate. It was then forwarded to a deputy who forwarded the same to his minister, outgoing minister, in the transition period on the same day, October 12th. Mr. Chair, do you know who that outgoing minister was? It was Kevin Klein. All this information that I've just laid out to you was forwarded to Kevin Klein on that day, October 12th. So, as I've laid out here, there's obviously a dispute over the facts with respect to current members of the PC caucus and myself. Kevin Klein enters the fray and he bolsters our case. Interestingly, shortly after current members of the PC caucus went out into public and to try to double down on the misrepresentations, Rochelle Squires wrote a column in the Winnipeg Free Press in which she pointed out that the current member for Red River North inappropriately pressured her to approve the Mine 2. And do you know what date that took place on, according to Rochelle Squires? October 12th.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And it's interesting that once again, the Premier, this is estimates, and so I was hoping for us to be able to get into some budgetary items and get some questions answered. And it seems like the Premier is once again going down a vein of question and various different things and putting misinformation on the record and repeated information. And he's taken this opportunity in estimates to again grab the microphone, much like we have seen over the last almost 8 months now, and again be more showman than statesman and not really step up and do the role of a premier that the role the premier should be doing. It's unfortunate that again the premier seems to be getting even more and more famous for dodging and deflecting questions. He had the opportunity just a few minutes ago, prior to estimates, to scrum and speak to media, and once again, even though the premier has his media experience from way back, dodged the media and said that we needed to get into estimates. And estimates is very important topic and piece and process in our democratic society here in Manitoba. And so he wasn't in a hurry to get to estimates following up the budget debate. And so it's interesting that once again he talks about process today, and he says let's respect the trial process. When I asked him a question in estimates just last week, he said he doesn't really believe what he's saying because he feels that if he says things enough, people will tend to believe him. But in fact, that we know better, and Manitobans are starting to pick up on it as well. He doesn't believe in process, only when it suits him. I've said multiple times that, and the documents that the Premier is talking about today again is older documents, and it's unfortunate that he's using one of his new MLAs to be the messenger on that, as opposed to him standing there and saying what he needs to say in front of the media. But it's old information. The media has that information. PC Caucus, I can only speak to PC Caucus members, are going to work with the Ethics Commissioner and through the process, respecting the process. We know evidence of the Premier not respecting the process. We talk about the tobacco court information in regards to the many years of that going into courts with other provinces. But no, this Premier of Manitoba, decides to go to his party AGM, party convention, and tries to grandstand. But that's nothing new. Been watching this Premier for quite a few years, and I'm seeing more and more signs of that, of a little more selfishness than what he actually was elected to be doing. Today we saw him dodge and deflect away some of the questions in regards to a historical church in our city, a monument that people come from all over, not only Manitoba, but the country and in fact the world at times. Asked him a very serious question about how he can potentially help, if he's going to potentially help. He dodged it and put it back on them. Then we asked some questions in regards to crime and how more and more violent crime is happening not only Winnipeg, but in Manitoba under this Premier's watch. And again, almost 8 months, no serious plans. He had lots of time in opposition to come up with some plans. He has not done so, and he's failing miserably. And that's why he's feeling that he needs to dodge and deflect any serious questions and come up with other things.
The honourable member's time has expired. Sorry. Oh. The Honourable First Minister.
I do feel compelled to point out that the member opposite said old information. It's new to us. This Freedom of Information request was satisfied on May 27th of 2024. When did the member for Lac du Bonnet know about this? He was a member of the Executive Council under the previous administration. When did he become aware of these inappropriate efforts to pressure Kevin Klein and Rochelle Squires? You want to talk about deflection, Mr. Chair? You want to talk about skirting around the issue? These are questions that he in his capacity as a leader of the opposition and as a former member of the Executive Council should answer in the public interest. There is a serious substantive issue having to do with the subversion of the democratic will of the people of Manitoba. And this is not just one party saying that the other party was behaving inappropriately in a transition period. Multiple former ministers of the Crown of that defeated administration have corroborated our story and said that what they experienced and what they witnessed was wrong. There is a substantive issue here. This is new information being put on the record. The member opposite likely has some knowledge or some information to share, particularly seeing, and I quote, old information, end quote, being the term of art that he uses here today. This is old information to him. Perhaps he would like to share the context. Again, if we examine the record, there is a serious substantive issue here. The clerk of the Executive Council was alarmed. There had to be multiple reminders, not only of the caretaker convention, but an additional reminder that civil servants couldn't be brought into this, that it had to be ministers. No doubt because civil servants knew duty and respect for the democratic will of the people. PC colleagues that the member opposite currently sit with apparently did not show that level of respect. So again, the current opposition House Leader, who was in the Minister of Agriculture, the current opposition member for Red River North, who was in the member for Edit, the defeated, or actually resigned during a budgetary process, former Minister of Finance, Cliff Cullen, are all invoked in this email, which came on the same day, October 12th, that Rochelle Squires reports in her column as being inappropriately pressured. I might ask staff to get 4 copies of this column from Rochelle Squires so that we can table it, just so that the members opposite have at their disposal. The title of it is Gradual, Then Sudden Corruption. It's a remarkable headline for a former minister of the Crown to print, coming as it was just over 3 months after their administration was defeated. The substance of it is Rochelle Squires sharing on the record that she was inappropriately pressured to approve the silica mine. That the phone call came, as she asserts, from the member for Red River North on October 12th. Same day that civil servants were being put into a very awkward position by many defeated members of the Crown, who for whatever reason were trying to approve a silica mine in eastern Manitoba. The mine proposed site is not too far from the member opposite's constituency. I'm sure he would have heard quite a bit about this issue. He may have asked many times, I assume, what was going on with it on behalf of constituents, legitimately so. There's no evidence that anything other than that took place. But I do think it's important that the people of Manitoba have some insight as to why so many members of the Crown, ministers of the Crown rather, including the defeated Premier, would be engaged so strenuously on this. And why does the timeline of these documents align with the timeline on the record, not just to myself and other members of our team, but with Kevin Klein and with Rochelle Squires? So again, the member opposite likely has some information. He let slip that comment about old information. So I'd invite him to share with the people of Manitoba. When did he become aware? And how? Of this inappropriate attempt to subvert the Caretaker Convention.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And again, the Premier is doing a great display again this afternoon of dodging and deflecting, and he knows that there's copies of old FIPA documents online. He knows that. But again, he's using his time in estimates. He's using Manitobans' time in estimates to get some answers on this government's failings across so many departments. There is a process. The Premier flip-flops like that pickerel on a dock, whether he's going to follow a process or not follow a process. There's a process with the Ethics Commissioner. And all members of the PC Party has agreed to abide by that process and work with the Ethics Commissioner. So it's unfortunate, Manitobans, that your Premier is busy dodging and deflecting on many questions and comments that are important to you. Could be crime, could be the fact that, the Premier says himself, what did he say just a few minutes ago? And I'm not going to direct quote because I'll look it up and answer it. But he makes a comment about the democratic role of the people of Manitoba. And I know that his chief of staff's probably rolling right now thinking, yeah, you shouldn't have said that, because you don't. Actions speak louder than words. The Premier doesn't believe in the democratic process for the people of Manitoba. He's taken a bits of bill, he's thrown in many other pieces of legislation, stapled it on the back of the bits of bill, and is trying to ram it through without any public consultations. But that's how this Premier rolls. Last night, we had committee, and there was an opportunity for members of the public to come and share their thoughts and views at committee. And more than 50% of the presenters had said damning information and comments in regards to this Premier and his government bills about the lack of consultation. Not even lack of consultation, no consultation. And the Premier sits here today, again, grandstanding, again, more showman than statesman, and tries to put additional things on the record. So, again, I'm hoping that the Premier will answer some of the questions that, as the interim leader of the official opposition, as I'm putting forth to him, he, of course, the cameras and the recordings don't necessarily pick up everything, but prior to the Premier raising his hand to actually put some words on the record, he was doing the old schoolyard bully tactics, murmuring under his breath, just loud enough for people to hear. And he thinks that this is not caught. He knows what to do. He's not that far removed from the old bullying days, and so he's bringing it forward into the chamber. And it's unfortunate. So I am going to resort back to a question that I had asked the Premier last time we were in estimates, and that is the public inquiry into Maya Grattan. You said that there was going to be a public inquiry. Where are we at with that now that we're a few days past last estimate sitting?
The Honourable First Minister.
I welcome accountability questions on this topic because I'm the first person to have raised the possibility of an inquiry into the matter. So the PCs stand up and try to, I guess, press the issue. It's totally fine with me. But again, there is an investigation which continues, which will lead to a trial and a judicial process. Information will come to light through that, and if at the end of that we still have unanswered questions, then as I've stated previously on many occasions, I'll be open to an inquiry. I wonder if the CO matter should be the subject of an inquiry someday. There is the Ethics Commissioner, however, so we'll definitely respect that process. But we have information that the public has a right to know. So we're sharing it. May 27, 2024, that's the date of this FIPA document. The deflection the member opposite is trying to wave away and say that this is somehow old is completely false. I answered every single question in question period today substantively on every topic that was put my way. And after touching on those topics, I then used the remainder of my time to touch on a very important issue here, which is that the outgoing administration inappropriately tried to approve a major new mining development in the province after they had lost power. That is not in the public interest. There are numerous unanswered questions about this. The heart of the Conflict of Interest Act goes to the question of members here, especially ministers of the Crown, not furthering other people's private interests. And so I think that's important for us to understand, because if you read the public comments from former members and current members, former members of the PC administration and current members of the PC caucus, you'll see that there's quite a bit of variation in terms of whether there were private interests involved. One says that the former premier did have a conflict and had to recuse. Another said that no, there was no conflict. The former premier herself has never answered these questions, so perhaps she will. So we will see. What about other members of the former administration? Were there private interests at play? It's clear that there was a flurry of activity the Friday following their defeat in the general election of 2023. Was that their own personal interests? Or was that somebody else's private interest they were acting on behalf of? Why was the advisory note generated for the Premier? Why, after that advisory note generated for the Premier, did multiple ministers of the defeated PC administration request it? Why did the Clerk of the Executive Council of the former government feel compelled to remind them that only these ministers, and not their civil servants working closely with them, should be forwarding these to other people? Why did the former Clerk of the Executive Council feel compelled to remind them that they were in caretaker convention? Does a member opposite support the Silica project? People in his constituency have spoken out quite loudly against it. Same with the member for Dawson Trail. In the end, we decided to approve one Silica project, CPS, and we said no to the SIO project. But I want to state clearly for the record that it had nothing to do with these inappropriate attempts to subvert the will of the people. We evaluated each project on their merits, economically, environmentally, and we said yes to CPS and no to CO. However, regardless of the eventual approvals or not of these projects, it is significant that the outgoing administration seemed so focused on trying to push one through prior to our new government being sworn in. That is, on the face of it, something that requires further inquiry. And here I don't use inquiry in the technical sense that we often use in this chamber. I use inquiry in the broader sense that I'm sure the Ethics Commissioner will be taking up, and that legitimately Manitobans have a right to know the answer to. And so this is a substantive public issue that we are disclosing.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And once again, the Premier goes ahead and doubles down on misinformation on the record. Again, more and more times when the Premier goes off script, he says things that he possibly shouldn't. So, for one example, let me just say that the dodging and deflecting that the Premier is doing on many questions that are important to Manitobans continue today. And he's trying to muddy the waters. And why is he trying to do this? He's doing this because he's trying to deflect from the failings of many of his front bench ministers, including some of his other ministers that are maybe even sitting close to him today. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality that Manitobans are going to see more and more of these failings by this Premier. So again, we respect the process of the Ethics Commissioner. Everyone on the PC caucus side has said that they would work with the Ethics Commissioner, work through the process, and that during that transition, and the Premier made a comment and affirms this actually, that there were no political or policy decisions made during that transition time, because he's patting himself on the back, so he says, to approve CPS and disapproved CO. But in fact, here's where we go with the fact that the Premier continues to put misinformation on the record and tries to deflect and dodge, again with misinformation to Manitobans, is that CPS was actually approved July 27th of 2023. So taking credit for certain things and not taking credit for others. But we saw this not that long after the 2016 election, when his previous mentor, Greg Selinger, felt that he was the star candidate in the 2016 election for the NDP. And it didn't take that long for, again, the true colors to come out. Characteristics of the Premier to come out and stab his figuratively, just so that anybody's not going to be clear out there, because we know that there has been some history on certain violent things, but figuratively stabbed the former Premier Salinger in the back and then carried on. And why? It's because we're seeing more showman than statesmanship. It's self-serving. It's not really for the betterment of Manitobans, it's for the betterment of the MLA for Fort Rouge, the now Premier. The Premier said that the inquiry is in the public interest. And I quote this from May 22nd, 2024 estimates. And I quote, he says, "But this is in the public interest, comma, so we will be sharing updates with the people of Manitoba as we go." May 22nd, 2024, his family's minister says, "I will not commit to making it public." So which is it? Once again, we're seeing cabinet ministers in the government not having proper communication. They can't get on board with one another. There's more deflecting. So which is it to the Premier?
The Honourable First Minister.
It's striking that on the day in which too much communication from the outgoing PC cabinet ministers to one another on the inappropriate approval of Silica, that the member opposite wants to talk about communication among cabinet. I have excellent communication with my colleagues. I hold each of them in high esteem. I would never ask any of them to violate the caretaker convention. The member opposite has lines, we have facts. The fact is, on October 6th, the former Premier of Manitoba, after her defeat in the election, had a briefing note on the approval of SIO generated. That is the same day that they tried to rush through the approval of this, and we told them to stop. We said no decision should be made on this until... Rattled already. Jeez. Can't even wait for the 5 minutes.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on a point of order.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The point of the order is the fact that the Premier continues to get off topic, but I know he's, again, he's trying to distract. So the point of order is that he's off topic. He should stick to the question that's asked, or at least close to it. Honourable Chairperson, it's not serving him well, and it's not serving Manitobans well. So that's my point of order, Honourable Chairperson, and I brought this up at the most timely time that I can possibly bring this forward to you.
The First Minister on the point of order.
On the same point of order. Timeliness is not a condition of a point of order. That is a matter of privilege. Clearly the member opposite is rattled. This is not a rule that is under consideration. He cited no rule. In order for a point of order to be found, it has to relate to a rule. What this seems more likely to be is an interjection. Perhaps the member opposite doesn't want to talk about SIO or CPS, but he clearly touched on those topics during the 5 minutes of speaking time that he just exercised. And so, proceeding in this committee as we do in a global fashion, I am choosing sequentially to touch on the very same topics that he raised in his time to posit, postulate, and in some instances ask questions. So, again, there is no rule that is being cited. This is not a point of order, and I will be happy to continue answering the question once I'm not interrupted again.
We'll just need one moment to consult. I want to thank you both for your contributions on the point of order. As it turns out, there was no point of order. Historically, the boundaries of relevance are very broad for Executive Council. But I do encourage everyone involved in the Committee of Supply to have a productive discussion. And so with that, the First Minister's time restarts at 5 minutes.
Well, thank you for your learned interjection there, Mr. Chair. So I believe the record will show what I'd already laid out. And again, it is effectively that the inappropriate attempt to approve this silica mine that the member opposite clearly knows something about, citing as he does various facts and dates to do with silica projects in Manitoba. His comments therefore are raising new questions that he has not addressed, though is clearly showing some knowledge of. That happened on October 6th, the inappropriate attempt. And yet, interestingly enough, Rochelle Squire said October 12th was a date in which she was inappropriately pressured, she alleges, by the member for Red River North. These documents align with that. Flurry of activity, civil servants cautioning, flagging considerations, and a number of ministers engaged, the names of whom we have all kind of heard over the course of this afternoon's deliberations and proceedings. On the question of the terrible tragedy that took place in Carmen, there is an ongoing investigation internal to government, and there are a lot of pieces of information and a lot of insights which are being pulled together. I do believe it is in the public interest. However, there are also a lot of rules around what can be shared publicly with young Manitobans who are in the care of the Child and Family Services system. Minister of the Crown, former Minister of the Crown, as he likes to call himself in the media, the member opposite namely, ought to be familiar with these provisions of the CFS Act in Manitoba. As a result, I think my learned colleague from St. John's is right to show a note of caution with respect to the public disclosure, seeing as the final version of this document, putative as it is in the current instance, has not been drafted, and therefore she can't make a final determination about what can be shared publicly and when. When we're talking about kids in care, when we're talking about something as tragic as this, I think it's important for us to proceed very judiciously and deliberatively. And so we will continue. This has been an issue that's affected me personally. I was compelled to visit Carmen on multiple occasions, to speak with family members and acquaintances, and to return again, to offer supports on an ongoing basis to the community that I saw exhibit strength in the face of terrible adversity. And so the timelines of the completion of that internal report are still being pulled together. I think it's important to know that we expect that will be soon. We will share this information when we're able to. We will watch the ongoing court proceedings, of course, and continue to engage with Manitobans to see what substantive questions remain about what went wrong and what can be done in the future to protect vulnerable Manitobans. I have to say, though, that examining what went wrong and trying to answer important substantive questions in the public interest goes to the heart of the matter that we've been talking about here today. Manitobans deserve to know, and so we're going to continue to share what we can on this and other substantive public policy issues. But I do want to point out for this committee that the member opposite has not addressed whether he had knowledge of this issue, but in fact does make comments which suggests that he is aware of the general context at the very least. And so I would like to know whether he had specific knowledge of these attempts by his colleagues to violate the Caretaker Convention. And I think Manitobans have a right to know as well too. Uncomfortable questions to consider, but they should be answered.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and the only one that seems to be uncomfortable in this process answering any questions is the Premier. And I think part of it is because we're coming up to 8 months since he has been the Premier of Manitoba, and we've asked many questions here in question period, asked questions and estimates. We've pointed out on more than one occasion the failings of not only himself, but some of the ministers that he's appointed to be ministers of various departments. They're either too busy to pay attention to their departments, or they're just not doing their homework. Just saw that again as an example of the Education and Early Childhood Learning Minister. And I think the Premier again is trying to deflect, as he's done so, not even masterly. He just deflects and dodges the questions, because he's trying to make sure that some of this is not sticking to him. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what you're watching or how you're seeing this play out, the Premier himself has shown signs of disapproval with his ministers. The fact that he's bringing forward the BITSA bill because his family's minister didn't do their job on the due diligence on bringing forward legislation according to the rules. Premier likes to talk about rules. We know how the Premier's dealt with rules in the past. Now he's walking it back as far as what's allowed to be presented and shared to Manitobans and the public. So my question to the Premier, I'm not going to use my whole 5 minutes because I know that's the Premier's MO. He'll just talk as long as he possibly can and run the clock with tidbits of misinformation on the record. So I'm just going to ask the Premier, the review that is happening, which is an internal review, who's doing that review?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, the review is conducted under Section 4 of the CFS Act, and it is being carried out by the relevant civil servants in the Department of Families who engage with us. And we have the highest and utmost respect for civil servants. In fact, the documents germane to our deliberations here in the House, I think, show us why. Obviously, we chose to go in a different direction. The former clerk of the executive council that existed under the PCs is not somebody that we're currently working with, but I respect her capacity, and I see in black and white evidence of her integrity. And so I think it's important for us all to remember the duty-bound civil servants, good work that they do. When it comes to BITSA, Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Act, that the member opposite raises, I'll point out for the committee that this is considered by the committee of the whole House. So the PCs have, gotten up in question period on numerous days and tried to make some sort of issue. about whether this will come to committee, and the answer is yes, it will. It will be considered by the committee of the whole House. Perhaps it'll be considered by other committees as well. But it will be considered by the committee of the whole House. And I'd like to know when the PCs brought BITSA to be considered by a committee other than the committee of the whole. I'd like to know which year in which the PC former administration did not include multiple amendments and multiple clauses with their budget implementation and tax statutes amendment act. Again, there are talking points and notes and things that the PC caucus is working up, but the fact is the PCs always use the committee of the whole House process. They always included multiple provisions and clauses within their budget implementation bills. We, of course, will be happy to continue to engage with them on questions of democracy because, again, today we have new evidence of them working across multiple former ministers of the Crown to subvert the democratic will of the people of Manitoba. Manitobans voted on October 3rd. They spoke in no uncertain terms. It was a clear verdict not only on 7.5 years of cuts to healthcare and chaos within public services, but also on the very negative campaign that was run by the PCs. The seat count is very clear, and it's not close. And I could list the name of former ministers of the Crown who had their political careers dramatically affected on that day. Perhaps I'll start with Kevin Klein and Rochelle Squires. I wonder what they're up to now. I know that Kevin Klein, of course, has a new business venture that we're watching with great interest. Rochelle Squires also writing in a newspaper. I respect them and their rights to be able to proffer a living for themselves. Interesting that the two of them, though, would be united in their unequivocal indication that the outgoing administration behaved inappropriately and violated the Caretaker Convention. So again, we respect the process. There's also an important series of facts that we've ascertained here and believe that the people of Manitoba should know. And when you put what is on the record to date on this issue of Silica together with this new information, the very least you could say is that there are significant questions that need to answer. You could probably, using deductive and inductive reasoning, arrive at more substantive statements than that, but again, I try to be measured, I try to be pragmatic. But I am very, very curious to know about what the member opposite knew about what his colleagues were up to in the dying days of the transition period. I respect the fact that if he's spoken to the Ethics Commissioner, he probably should not speak about that publicly. But in due course, I am sure that these facts will come out, and I look forward to hearing them. I think I touched a nerve there.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I think the only nerves that the Premier is talking or touching on is the fact that, again, seems to be dodging and deflecting some of the questions, and he's not taking accountability. He's the leader of the NDP government, and fact is that 75% of Manitobans did not choose him. I've stated this in the past. We lost the election. He did not win it, and I think that's why, as far as nerves go, that's why he's nervous. And he's also nervous because he knows that his cabinet ministers already have failed him. He's put them in situations, in charge of departments, where they've already failed some of it. It's unfortunate because it's not him that they're failing Manitobans.
But again, the Premier, he can't handle that. He can't handle that because it is all about the Premier. And we know that he has other aspirations as well. And so time will tell, time will show more and more of those out there, because he's definitely not as advertised. Definitely not as advertised. Far more showman than statesman. And so the question on the inquiry, and he mentioned Section 4 of the review. So what is the limitation of a Section 4 review?
The Honourable First Minister.
So again, we can produce copies of the CFS Act if the members opposite would like. Section 4 review, in this instance, is examining the interactions that may have taken place with the victims of this terrible tragedy and child welfare system. And I believe is also entertaining, to the extent possible, whether perhaps there were instances where other forms of involvement should have been contemplated, but perhaps weren't. It's difficult to speak in detail on this without knowing the outcome of said report. But I can tell the committee that it is being conducted by the civil service within the Department of Families, as well as by the relevant staff within the general authority. So of course there's currently 4 authorities within the province. It's our hope that with Indigenous nations exercising their authority under Bill C-92 at the federal level, that we will be able to dramatically transform the CFS system to be able to better meet the needs of kids in our province and the expectations of Manitobans from all walks of life. I do note that in his answer, the Leader of the Opposition states clearly, and I quote, "We lost the election," end quote. And that's a substantive matter here on the issue of the day. They lost the election and yet continued to try to make public policy decisions that significantly affect the lives of Manitobans, including in his own constituency and neighboring constituencies. Much was made over the impacts potentially on drinking water. Much was made over the potential environmental concerns. A lot of due diligence was conducted into the economic development claims being made by the proponent and other related actors. And so these are important public policy questions. The previous government had not made a decision on whether or not SIO should be approved in Manitoba. I assume they were waiting to see the outcome of the election, knowing that this was a hot topic politically in the constituencies of Lac de Bonnie and Dawson Trail and many others out there. Again, some people supportive of the project, other people vehemently opposed. It seems like, if I had to guess, the outgoing PC administration didn't want to touch that political hot potato. Though judging by their actions during the transition period, they clearly had an important, well, not important in the public interest, but more so important to them, desire to ram this project through after they lost government. So what would drive an outgoing administration to fear a political issue so much that they dare not approve it while they were legitimately in office? And yet, on the flip side, what would attract them so much to that project that they would risk what they are currently experiencing in order to force it through after they'd already lost power? Again, if people in the constituencies mentioned, opposed it, and the members opposite took it seriously, perhaps they would have just spiked the project then. But they refused to do so, presumably because of some other interest, perhaps a political interest, perhaps a private interest, maybe the public interest, though they've never made the case to that extent. So I think this is very important for us to consider. But yeah, the PCs refused to engage with SIO while in office, and it's clear, not only in black and white from the facts shared today, but also from the comments of their former colleagues, that they did try to engage with it by rushing it through after they lost power.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So, Honourable Chairperson, once again, for the hundreds of people that are watching at home, the Premier again doesn't only dodge and deflect any of the questions. The fact is he didn't answer the question. So I said, what is the limitation of a Section 4 review? Didn't answer it. So let me get this straight. So you got the director, you got the civil service, and you got the authorities. They're in charge of doing the review. A systematic issue that absolutely failed Maya. The Premier sits there and dodges the question. Let me repeat that. The director, the civil service, and the authority are in charge of doing the review on the ones that failed Maya. I've said it twice for the Premier. Does that sound like something that should be happening? And I asked that question to the Premier. Is that the way it should be happening?
The Honourable First Minister.
I just want to point out for the benefit of the committee the logical inconsistency of the member opposite's position. In the preamble in which he alleges that I'm not answering questions, he repeats facts that I've already shared on the record and attempts to say that those are points that I have not previously shared with the committee. I realize he's got his talking points and his lines and he has difficulty pivoting off of them, but again, If the question previously is what is the limitation of the Section 4 review, I offered numerous limitations in my previous answer, and any close reader of Hansard will be able to ascertain what I'm referring to. A few examples were, again, some of the limits about what we can disclose under the Act. Some of the other limits are what we can share at this committee at this stage while the report is still being drawn together. And there are other limitations that I alluded to. To the substantive question at hand here, that the member poses with some emotion, is this the way it should be? I would say that we have to show respect for the courts and law enforcement. And yet at the same time, we should take action immediately to start answering the questions of what went wrong. So our Minister of Families has done so. They've initiated the Section 4 review, which is an internal process, so that we can begin to ascertain what led to this terrible tragedy. And yet to do so and engage in this examination in a way that is consistent with respecting the due course of justice and the continued public confidence in the administration of justice within our province. These are important considerations. Public confidence in the member opposite, though, in the member for Interlake Gimli, the member for Red River North, Cliff Cullen, Heather Stephenson. These should be immutable. Questions of an election should hang on policy choices. What is the right way or the wrong way to approach healthcare in Manitoba? We've said that investing in healthcare is better than cutting healthcare, as was practiced by the former PC government. Unfortunately, though, judged by the campaign that they mounted, the members opposite wanted to focus on wedge politics, to touch on, well, I don't even like to mention the distasteful ads that were run. But they know. And now we see that we're also confronted with whether questions about their former administration should consider whether they behaved inappropriately during the transition period. It is clear that they did. The will of the people was exercised on October 3rd. The outgoing PC administration took actions on October 6th to disrespect that will, and again on October 12th. Since then, there has been internal to the PC party. Perhaps they want to overstate things by calling it a conflict, but saying it's an internal dialogue is probably understating things by the same token. But Rochelle Squires and Kevin Klein, again, not natural political allies of myself, have raised the alarm. And their comments are at odds with what the member for Red River North has said. In fact, at odds to the extent that both of their accounts cannot both be true. Similarly, new information suggests that more people were involved in the outgoing administration. And so it's a significant public policy question. I first came to learn of the caretaker convention years prior, but I think it's an important principle. And I can commit to the people of Manitoba that I will always respect the caretaker convention. I think it's significant. And I think it's significant for the members opposite. Clear as it is that they will not weigh in, except to maybe tip their hand a little bit, that they know quite a bit more than they're letting on. I'd encourage them to reflect on what it means to respect democracy and respect the will of the people.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and respect. Isn't that interesting that the Premier is using the term respect and respect for democracy? And we know, and we will continue to show Manitobans that Those words are hollow from the Premier. He couldn't be talking farthest from his true beliefs about respect for democracy and what Manitobans think or feel. He also says respect for the courts. Well, we've seen that's not true on many occasions. He also says that he's got firsthand experience with transitioning. The caretaker situation in governments, and he says he's got experience from that years ago. I don't even know what he's talking about. Again, he's putting information on the record that he has nothing to back that up. He talks about various notes and speaking points and talking points and those types of things. Well, generally, when you are in estimates, whether it's the Premier or a minister or an opposition leader or critic, there are the odd note that comes in. And if the public were able to see the stack of files that have been cruising in here to aid the Premier, it would be interesting. So it's just interesting how the Premier throws shade over various different things, but this is, again, this goes to those that schoolyard bully tactics that I know he's done for many, many years, and myself on this side of the house is not going to put up with it. We're not going to be intimidated by the Premier. He likes to, and I see some members on the government side nodding their head that, he's done that in caucus. We know that. So we've got the director, we've got the civil service, and we've got the authority. And right here in the CFS Act, subsection 4(3), it says the director may, and I'm quoting from the Act, and I know that the Premier was boastfully, and a tad bit of arrogance as well, saying that, he's going to get us a copy of the Act, but no need. So I'm going to read this out to the Premier because I know he doesn't know this. The director may, in writing, authorize a person or an agency to perform any of the director's duties or exercise any of the director's powers. Why would the director not use the authority and delegate the authority to investigate to an independent third party? And why would the Premier not be encouraging that?
The Honourable First Minister.
All this paper on my desk documents the violation of the Caretaker Convention under the PCs. It is quite an impressive assortment of documents. On the question that the member arrives at, I guess the answer is we're looking into what went wrong to try and figure out what can be done better in the future. And having had a front row seat for the PC time in office, I can tell you that on issues like police headquarters or on the pandemic or specific incidents such as the one that we're talking about here, there was never any exigency or urgency to move forward with the sort of process he's proposing. Members opposite knows that to be true. Of course, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. That's why we are investigating. That's why we are reviewing what took place. And that's why we are open to an inquiry into the future. Though I am very interested that the member opposite wants to talk about the caretaker convention. Began his preamble by talking about it. So what I will say is this. The transition into government last fall was my first time observing the caretaker convention with respect to an incoming government administration. However, as an MLA, I became aware of the principles of the caretaker convention years prior, which is to say that any member of the public should expect that the members opposite would have known about their responsibilities under the caretaker convention. Any MLA should know this. The caretaker convention is most clearly described at the federal level, and of course, deferring to the procedural experts in the room here as represented by the clerks of the Legislative Assembly. I would point out for the benefit of the committee that we quite often adopt rules, practice, and precedent from the Federal House of Commons. And in this instance, the caretaker convention as articulated there offers us a guideline of what to do and what not to do. Long story short, after you've been defeated in an election, you should not try to ram through the approval of a sand mine in eastern Manitoba. However, we see a torrent of documents that the member opposite comments on that document the furious activity of the former administration to do exactly that. So, the caretaker convention is a significant consideration, and it is one that we should all be aware of as MLAs. But even if we weren't, if the clerk of the Executive Council of the day were to raise the alarm about the caretaker convention needing to be respected, perhaps that would be the opportunity to learn and educate oneself. That's exactly what happened on October 12, 2023. Former clerk of the Executive Council, and I quote, "I will continue to state, as provided to these members, that we are in caretaker convention until the new government is sworn in," end quote. Then, of course, there's a bunch of text that's blacked out. It cites a section of a different act, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Specifically, Section 23, bracket 1, bracket A. And it says, under that section of that act, that the head of a public body may refuse to disclose information to an applicant if disclosure could reasonably be expected to reveal advice, opinions, proposals, recommendations, analyses, or policy options developed by or for the public body or a minister. Seems likely that the redacted section refers to the advisory note generated for the former Premier, Heather Stephenson. Former clerk of the Executive Council, flagging that the caretaker convention needed to be respected when it came to what that note contemplated, which was the approval of the CO Silica sand mine in eastern Manitoba. For the record, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Is it CO? SIO? I hear both. Perhaps the member opposite can enlighten me.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Honourable Chairperson, thanks for that. And in regards to the question that, again, the Premier is dodging, but to answer the pronunciation that the Premier has now put, he could turn to his minister, the MLA for St. Vital, because I know that the minister himself took a picture just last week, I believe, at the Manitoba Prospectors and Developers Association event that CO was the main gold sponsor. So he could turn and have that conversation with his Minister of Economic Development and and Trade and Natural Resources, the MLA for St. Vital, but I know, once again, that would be the Premier actually having a conversation with his cabinet colleagues, where I know that that rarely happens. So we already know that in regards to Ms. Meyer-Grattan and the family and the community, and it's absolutely a horrendous situation that should never ever happen again. But we do know that these things do happen, and it's horrendous. And the Premier is using the inquiry, again, the internal inquiry, that the director, the civil servants, and the authority are going to be doing the internal inquiry. And the Premier's wondering what went wrong. So I guess to the Premier, when was he made aware of the phone call to Child and Family Services?
The Honourable First Minister.
I can take the matter under advisement to provide a substantive and thorough response, but I can tell you that I became aware on one occasion in speaking to the late Maya Lee Grattan's mother. It's a conversation I don't think any parent wants to have, and certainly my heart goes out to her with a ton of compassion. And I can only imagine. The review is important to our administration for those reasons, and also for the people of Manitoba. I think it's safe to say that people in the province were rocked by what happened, upset, and want there to be a thorough hearing of the facts and course forward. And so we are taking action in that direction. We already have, and we continue to steer the ship in that manner. At the same time, there have been many inquiries and commissions which have examined related issues, going back to the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, which did contemplate the child welfare system in Manitoba, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, whose first calls to action deal with child welfare, the National Inquiry to Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit people, a number of reports from the Children's Advocate, the Phoenix Sinclair Inquiry, and others. And so what we won't do is use process as an excuse for inaction, as we saw under the previous PC administration. So we are taking a serious review of what took place here, and this will be subject to independent review by the Children's Advocate. And at the same time, we're taking action to implement what has already been called for in all those inquiries and commissions that I alluded to and mentioned specifically. On May 13th of this year, you saw the Minister of Families and our team committing to Indigenous nations in Manitoba that, in keeping with those recommendations, calls to justice and calls to action, that we will move ahead with the transfer of jurisdiction as soon as an Indigenous nation is prepared to do so. I've had the opportunity to talk to people directly affected by the Carmen tragedy, and this topic has come up in those conversations, and it is consistent with the opinions and wishes that we've heard articulated in those conversations. And so we will take action. The goal of our administration is, I hope, not to have to deliver more speeches such as I did in the wake of this terrible tragedy. I hope not, to have to hear the news of other young people experiencing such a terrible outcome. And so that's the goal, that's the plan, that's what we're doing. When it comes to the issue of the day, a short time ago, the member opposite went into the hallway and said, I quote, "If you've taken the time to take a look at it, already has, and the Ethics Commissioner has that document as well," end quote. So again, speaking extemporaneously, as we often do in front of the media, and as I'm sure the member opposite was, again, there is an important public policy question raised by his comments in front of the media today. We found out about this document on May 27, 2024, or later. In the scrum today, the member opposite asserts that the Ethics Commissioner already has that document. How would he know? On what basis did he assert that to media? And actually, of course, the member opposite, if he has spoken to the Ethics Commissioner, should not share what he said to the Ethics Commissioner. But I do believe that he's free to disclose whether he has spoken to the Ethics Commissioner. So two separate questions here for him to consider. But the most substantive one is probably, if he is aware that the Ethics Commissioner has the information that we tabled in the House today, how does he know that?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And once again, I know the Premier longs for the time to be back in opposition so that a lot of the authority and difficult decisions that premiers and governments have to make, he will no longer have to do that. Because he has shown over the last almost 8 months that he's not ready for this job. He thought he was, surrounded himself with or appointed some of his colleagues to ministerial roles that I think have upset him because they're not fulfilling their obligations, not only to their departments, Manitobans, but him directly. So the Premier states transition of authority, transition of care, but that's not necessarily keeping kids safe today. So what did the Premier and his minister do to immediately protect children in care? Children cannot wait. What specifically changed?
The Honourable First Minister.
What we did immediately was to reach out to the people affected directly by this terrible tragedy. Out of respect for those folks, I've talked a bit about some of those conversations, but I'll probably leave it at that. To the community affected, I attended vigils and memorials in Carmen. And I share that with this committee so that you could understand that in attendance of those events, I heard many references to the important work being done by Carmen Wellness Connections. I also heard about a desire to memorialize the victims of this terrible tragedy. The immediate action, we went back and we found sustainable core funding for Carmen Wellness Connections. And unlike the members opposite who put out press releases and never found the budgets to pay for the commitments that they were making to the people of Manitoba in an election year, we actually put it through the formal budgetary process and funded these initiatives. Carmen Wellness Connections is an organization, I would point out, that it was not just there in the aftermath, they were there supporting families living in situations, whether it was poverty, dealing with mental health, dealing with the child welfare system. There's a lot of people in Carmen who aren't that well off and need help. There's a lot of people in Carmen who are better off and still need assistance, as it is through mental health and other initiatives that I think we've all become more aware of since the pandemic. This terrible tragedy took place in the early months of the year. These are some of the things that we can point to specifically for those most impacted by it. When we talk about the system, child welfare, well, one of the first things we did was negotiate a settlement to the Child Special Allowance lawsuit. A settlement that was necessary because of the previous government's effort to legislate away the rights of children in the child welfare system. Minister of Families was a leading advocate in making sure that that task was accomplished, and it was to rectify a situation that went to the courts because of the actions of the previous government under a BITSA bill. Lighthearted moments for the committee to entertain. Perhaps the creator is seeing fit to bring a moment of levity during a very difficult conversation about a tragic moment in our province. C-92, the declaration on May 13th to proceed. It's a core recommendation of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry. So there are many things that we have done to advance the protection of children in our province in the direct, immediate sense, but also in the broader systemic and structural sense. And I want to make clear for the committee that these are just the steps we have taken to date. This work will continue, and our goal is to ensure that children in Manitoba are safe. We want kids to be safe when they're growing up in their own homes, the homes of extended family members, broader communities in which they are raised, or when by necessity they are in the child welfare system. But there is a tone of moral condescension that I hear from the member opposite, which is inappropriate given what his former administration is shown to have done during the transition period. I'm happy to engage on issues of substantive public policy, but I would encourage the member opposite to come forward with a tone of humility, given that as it is on a day in which his former premier, his colleagues, some of whom current colleagues in the legislature today, are shown to have violated the Caretaker Convention and therefore disregarded the will of the people of Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. So I asked a fairly straightforward question in regards to the actions of this premier and his minister.
We know that the Premier admitted that he was aware of the call. He's going to give us a more substantial answer sometime in the future, which really doesn't overly matter. The fact is that he did receive a call. He was aware of it. And even though vigils and memorials, they're very nice, but it does not protect children. And listening to the Premier in his last answer shows once again, and he admits that nothing has changed. It's been months. It's been months, and nothing has changed. It's upsetting, Honorable Chairperson, but it's a fact that this Premier admits he was aware of the call to CFS, and months after, this tragedy, nothing has changed. And his own director of the system, is the one that is reviewing what potentially went wrong or is reviewing the system. When the director themselves has the authority and may in writing authorize a person or agency to perform any of the director's duties or exercise any of the director's powers. The police service has the individual independent investigation unit for situations just like this. And this Premier has been sitting on this for months and nothing has changed. Why has nothing changed?
The Honourable First Minister.
I've stated extensively in my previous answer all the things that have changed. I would like to table, for the benefit of the member opposite, a document that outlines the Caretaker Convention. I encourage him to read it before we come back to this committee again on a future sitting day.
The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise, call in the Speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 1:30 p.m. tomorrow.